My name is Shupe, and so we are going to take off from where Group 1 has left us. So today we're looking at the electromobility ecosystem, and what Group 1 has nicely showed us is when we start with a problem, we start with the old concept of car parks, where car parks are dark and they're a labyrinth and they are a toll on time as well as pollutive. We have a space to move in, and this is where we see an investment opportunity. So now we have an investment opportunity, and the question that my group is to tackle is how IP can be used with respect to these building a new electromobility ecosystem around a customer experience. And when we start from this customer experience, as Group 1 has showed us, we move into many different realms, including branding, technology, the digital space, content, data, apps. And so the question that my group, which consists of Johannes, Peter, Timofey, Sinara, Sahin, Yanan, Andreas, and Nina, we're going to take you through how IP management systems can rearrange and organize themselves to make to help investors achieve their to maximize their economic rents through appropriation mechanisms. Okay, so we will bring you through workflows, process management, task allocation, and through several IP core processes and sub-processes.
Okay, first we show the core processes of IP management and give a short description of these processes in the order they are usually used. Therefore, we start with IP strategy development, where we define IP goals according to our business model. The next process would be a generation of IP, where we design and develop IP according to our strategy. Then the next process would be IP administrations, where we manage our IP according to the economic use we want to have. Of course, we have to do IP risk management, where we identify infringements by our own IP. And of course, we also have the process of IP enforcement, where we identify infringements done by others. And if these infringements are actually existing, we have to use the process IP-related defense, where we react to the attacks from the others. Also, we have to look at the process of IP's transaction, where we have a look at the licensing relationships to other companies for our licenses and for their licenses. Also, we have to do IP reporting, where we show and report our own IP portfolio so that we can optimize it. And last but not least, we also in the IP management have the process of IP awareness raising, where we create awareness to everybody actually of IP, or especially to stakeholders. Now I give word to Peter.
Next slide. So Johannes presented, a series of steps, series of processes that we might go through in order to define a management of IP. And we'll take two examples of this: patents and trademarks. Timofey will deal with trademarks. I'll deal with patents. And during each of these stages, we may do a number of different steps. They have defined starting and ending points within the process. First of these may well be the detection of customer-related features. Now, in this example, it shows it happening later, maybe happening later in the process. But before we process invention disclosures, before we identify IP business model features, business model elements, maybe we need to feed the customer side of things, the customer features that are important to the market into the process. That will drive the business model creation. It will drive the IP then that comes out of that business model creation. And from there, we might generate invention disclosures. And those invention disclosures are processed, using the steps we've talked about. We make a decision on how those invention disclosures might translate into an IPR application of some form or other. Those IPR applications then are prepared into a patent application that takes a period of time. That patent application is filed, and then the paperwork and so on associated with the patent application is processed and prosecuted over time. Timothy.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So as the Peter said, we're trying to identify the elements from the business model, and for trademarks, the process is in view of the steps is a little similar as for patents, but here for the trademarks, we try to identify the elements which will potentially communicate with the customer. So we identify the core elements which for communication. Then we're trying to identify the protectable assets which we derive from the shaping of these core elements. Then once we identify this shaped elements, we also decide whether we proceed with further application, trademark application, or it also could be a design application. We talk about that this IP not only as a trademark but also as something which protect the ecosystem appearance. So once we decide whether we will proceed with the so-called IPR application, we prepare the trademark or design application for that. And if we see that the core element was shaped onto the several shaped elements, we also can create accompanying trademark or design applications. And further, I will give the floor to my colleague who will describe the workflow.
Thank you. So when we start a business, we tend to file and protect some elements that in the end, when we understand better the business and the field we are in, we need to decide if we maintain the patent portfolio or drop some patent families. So usually these decisions are feeding from the marketing, from the customers, and sometimes is for economic reasons too. So it's advisable to follow this sequence to IP administration to make this decision. So we start to have relevant information, carry out the evaluation, have a report. This is in an administration level. So, and then we level up this information to have a decision. And then we can choose if we maintain some protections or restrict or drop some patent families. So maybe my next colleague.
Yeah, so this slide talks about the inputs and outputs of the processes we mentioned earlier in slide 2. So basically, as was indicated, the IP design happens in accordance with the business model. So it can so happen that for similar products, different business models would lead to different IP strategies. So we kind of need a description of the business model to come up with the IP strategy. And then we need an invention disclosure that needs to be formalized. It would be good to have stuff like applicants and inventors sorted out in a formal invention disclosure, which will be for internal use. It would also help if the formal invention disclosure describes the innovation clearly. So the innovation is driven by the market demand. And if there's a clear description of the innovation, we would be able to extract the customer benefit from it. So these would be the user interface features where the user interacts with some tech feature. And these are the customer benefits that we will protect using patents in this case. And then, yeah, we make a decision to file the patent and prepare the patent based on the formal invention disclosure. So, Timofey, you want to talk about trademark?
Yep. For the trademarks, yeah, the process steps are a little similar as of patents, but here we have inputs and outputs as the materials which are related to the appearance and the brand perception. So for identification of the core elements of communication, so product design and marketing materials, out of this we can identify the concrete IP requirements, which potentially will be further needed for deciding whether we will file IPR application or not. Then for shaping of elements to protectability, we're trying to identify from these requirements the concrete communication elements, which could be the source for further IP protection. Yeah, in terms of parking, for example, it could be colors, shapes, or lighting of the parking lot, for example. And with shaping, we're trying to modify or find the concrete element which will somehow fall into a protectable design element or potential trademark. So once this element was derived, we then further take the decision whether we will make the filing the application or not. So we can, on this step, we can also make some trademark co-design search just to identify whether it is really worth filing the application or not. And once the search was made, so we're making the preparation of the application and creating the application documents that we further file to the IP office. So regarding the task allocation in the process management, then my further colleague will explain to you.
This to carry out this IP process management, we have the task of allocation will be assigned into 4 different functions, and we could see it from the top to bottom in this figure. At the first stage, CTO as the manager will define the required process landscape, and the CTO will also take the responsibility for the documentation of the process. And then at the second stage, the head of IT department as the process owner would make a more detailed definition with limited scope in terms of the process. Additionally, the owner also play a leadership role for the process creation and development, as well as has the function at the aspect of monitoring and auditing. At the third stage, it turns to the IP manager, and to give reasonable planning and implementation of this process. Once the planning has been established, the manager will also provide the necessary training to all of the participants so that they can understand the whole programs smoothly. At the end, the process user like IP manager, administrator, or the service providers from a third party will follow this process to do their job. Thus, these processes are carried out. Next.
Yes, so now we have gone through the different steps of the IP management processes, and now we'll have a look at the innovation process. And as we will see, the innovation process have several interfaces with the with the IP management process. As we see here, the typical we discussed earlier, group 1, we have the ID generation and the ID evaluation, the SWOT analysis, which is converted into the resources and etc. and planning. And so we have here the IP-related evaluation of the innovation fields, which group 1 did. Next step is the product planning and checking in the economic and technical feasibility. And here comes the IP strategy development in, and also continuous prior art search from the IP risk management, the core processes. So continuous FDO. Then you go into the step of development and product design. Here again, you do the identification of customer relevant technical features. You have a look at what possible technical IP rights you can have. You do the identification of customer relevant design features for trademarks or design. And you do the generation of non-technical IP rights. Then in the next step, you have the test and validation prototype. You do prototype series development. Here is not listed any IP processes, but you could consider that you also should consider the prior art here again. And here finally you have the product and market launch with the FDO analysis. The FDO analysis you probably already done several times during the continuous prior art search. At least it would be a good idea to do that and not end up with the final product and finding out that you didn't have any freedom to operate. But it would always be wise to have sort of a final FDO before releasing the product into the market.
So we've come to the end of our presentation, I think. And so we've had a nice look and overview on IP management systems. And the important thing to remember is that every corporation is different, and you will have to adapt your workflows and your processes to suit the aims of your organization. Thank you very much.